The hum of machinery filled the sterile corridors of Sector 9 aboard the research vessel Aurora Dawn. The ship was a floating laboratory, designed to study anomalies and specimens too dangerous for Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Lisa Morin leaned against the observation window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she stared at the figure inside the containment cell. It had been 17 days since they brought subject aboard, and not once had she moved more than an inch from her seated position on the cold metal floor. Lisa sighed softly, brushing a strand of brown hair behind her ear before turning back to the monitors lining the wall. Numbers scrolled across screens in green and blue fonts, tracking heart rate, brain activity, and muscle tension. Everything about was unusual. She looked humanoid but wasn't quite human. Her skin shimmered faintly under the harsh lights, like polished black stone. Her eyes were solid, obsidian pools that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No one knew if she could see or hear or even understand what was happening around her. But protocol dictated caution, especially when dealing with something so alien. Ron Davis, the head of security, stood nearby, his broad shoulders tense as he scanned the room. He didn't trust this creature, not after reading the reports from the retrieval team. They'd found her unconscious on a moon orbiting a dying star, her escape pod half buried in ash and debris. There were no signs of other survivors, no communication signals, nothing to explain why she'd ended up there. All they knew was that she was alive, and strong enough to survive conditions that would kill any human instantly. "Still no change?" Ron asked, his voice low and gravelly. "No," Lisa replied without looking up, "not since we secured her." The restraints binding were state-of-the-art. Magnetically sealed cuffs around her wrists and ankles, neural dampeners strapped to her temples, and gravity anchors set to 10 times standard pull. Even then, the crew had taken extra precautions. The containment cell itself was reinforced with walls 3 feet thick, capable of withstanding explosive decompression. If tried anything, even a single twitch, it would trigger alarms loud enough to wake the entire ship. The assigned to analyze sat hunched over her tablet at the far end of the observation deck. Her dark curls framed her face as she scribbled notes onto a digital pad, had spent hours poring over scans and samples taken during initial examinations. So far, she hadn't found anything definitive. It's biology classification. Her cells weren't carbon-based like humans, but they weren't entirely silicon-based either. Whatever she was, she didn't fit neatly into any known category. "She's not reacting to stimuli," said suddenly, glancing up from her work. "I've run auditory tests, thermal shifts, even electromagnetic pulses. Nothing gets through." Lisa frowned. "What does that mean? Is she in some kind of stasis?" "I don't think so," shook her head. "Her vitals are stable, almost unnaturally so. Heart rate, respiration, brain activity, all within normal ranges for, well, whatever she is. But she's just sitting there, like she's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Ron muttered, gripping the railing along the observation window. No one answered. For 17 days had remained motionless, her expression blank, her body rigid. Some members of the crew whispered that she might be dead already, trapped in some kind of limbo between life and death. Others speculated that she was biding her time, gathering strength for an attack. Lisa preferred to think of her as a puzzle, a complex, enigmatic challenge waiting to be solved. But all of that changed late one evening, when the transport shuttle returned from its mission. The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, its engines winding down as the airlock cycled open. Lieutenant Chris stepped out first, his uniform streaked with dust and grime. Behind him came 2 other members of the rescue team, their faces pale and drawn. They carried something bundled in thermal blankets, cradling it carefully as though it might break. "What is that?" Ron demanded, striding forward. Chris hesitated, adjusting his grip on the bundle. "We're not sure. We found it near the crash site where we recovered. It was in another escape pod, smaller, barely functional. Looks like," he paused, glancing down at the trembling shape in his arms, "like a young one." Lisa froze, a cub, an offspring, was it possible? Pushed past her, hurrying toward the group. Let me see it. Chris knelt slowly, unwrapping the blanket just enough to reveal a small, fragile form. It was barely the size of a house cat, its body covered in smooth, iridescent scales that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its wide, unblinking eyes darted around the room, taking in everything at once. Then it let out a weak, high-pitched squeak, a sound so sharp and sudden that everyone flinched. And that's when things went wrong. Deep within the containment cell, stirred. For the first time in 17 days, her muscles tensed. Her head tilted slightly, her obsidian eyes narrowing as they locked onto the source of the noise. Alarms blared immediately, red warning lights flashing across the observation deck. "She's moving," someone shouted. Lisa spun around, her heart pounding as she watched rise to her feet. The restraints groaned under the strain, metal twisting and snapping like twigs. Neural dampeners sparked and died. Gravity anchors overloaded, sending arcs of electricity crackling through the air. "Get back," Ron barked, drawing his sidearm. But wasn't attacking. Instead, she turned her gaze toward Chris, who still held the cub in his arms. Her movements were deliberate, calculated. She stepped closer to the barrier, her expression unreadable. "It's okay," Chris murmured, though whether he was speaking to the cub or no one could tell. The cub squeaked again, louder this time, and that's when truly transformed. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the ship, she slammed both fists into the wall. Cracks spiderwebbed outward, splitting the supposedly indestructible material like glass. The crew scrambled backward, shouting orders and firing stun rounds that bounced harmlessly off her skin. "Fall back," Ron yelled, grabbing Lisa by the arm and pulling her away. But Lisa couldn't look away. Through the chaos, she saw something unexpected in his eyes, not rage or malice, but desperation. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to protect. The sound of shattering echoed through the observation deck like a thunderclap. Shards rained down, glinting dangerously in the harsh overhead lights as stepped into the open space for the first time since her capture. The crew scrambled backward, their faces pale with fear and confusion. Ron Davis raised his weapon again, aiming directly at its chest, but his hand trembled slightly. He had trained for situations like this, but nothing could prepare him for the sight of an alien breaking free from restraints designed to hold beings 10 times stronger than humans. Didn't look at Ron or the others. Her focus was singular, unwavering. She moved with fluid grace, each step deliberate and controlled, her obsidian eyes locked onto Lieutenant Chris. Chris stood frozen, the cub cradled awkwardly in his arms. The small creature let out another weak squeak, its tiny body trembling against the blanket. Its expression softened ever so slightly, though it was hard to tell beneath the shimmering surface of her skin. "Put it down," Ron shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. "Now." Chris hesitated, his grip tightening instinctively around the cub. He wasn't sure what would happen if he obeyed or disobeyed, but something deep inside told him that letting go might make things worse. Lisa Morin pushed forward, her heart racing as she tried to think clearly. She had spent days studying, analyzing every scan and data point, but none of that mattered now. What she saw in front of her wasn't just an alien, it was a mother. "Wait," Lisa said urgently, stepping between Ron and "Don't shoot." Ron turned sharply toward her, his jaw clenched. "Are you crazy? She's going to tear us apart." "No," Lisa insisted, her voice firm despite the chaos around them. "Look at her, she's not attacking us. She's protecting," she trailed off, gesturing toward the cub in Chris's arms. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the faint hum of machinery and the soft rustling of the cub shifting in its blanket. Tilted her head slightly, her gaze flicking between Chris and Lisa. Then she took another step forward, her movements slow and cautious. Edged closer, her tablet forgotten in her hands. "She's communicating," whispered almost to herself. "Not with words but with actions. She wants the cub back." Ron lowered his weapon slightly but kept it trained on. How do we know she won't turn on us once she has it? We don't, Lisa admitted. But we can't risk hurting the cub either. If she really is its mother, and I think she is, we need to give it to her. Chris glanced at Lisa, uncertainty written all over his face. What if she hurts me when I get close? She won't, Lisa said quickly, though she wasn't entirely sure. Just move slowly. Show her you're not a threat. Taking a deep breath, Chris nodded and began walking toward. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, to drop the cub and flee, but he forced himself to stay calm. He held the bundle out carefully, keeping his movements steady and deliberate. Watched him approach, her head tilting again as if trying to understand his intentions. When Chris was within arm's reach, he stopped and crouched slightly, offering the cub to her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air seemed heavy, charged with tension. Then reached out, her three-fingered hand hovering hesitantly above the cub. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent, as she scooped the small creature into her arms. The cub let out a soft coo, nuzzling against her chest as if recognizing her immediately. Pulled it close, wrapping it protectively in the folds of her own body. A collective sigh rippled through the room as everyone realized the danger had passed for now. Ron holstered his weapon, though his hand lingered near it. Lisa exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of adrenaline drain from her shoulders. "Well," said finally, breaking the silence, "that answers one question at least." "What question?" Ron snapped, still glaring at. "That she's not our enemy," replied calmly. "She's a parent, and parents will do anything to protect their children." Lisa nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to rethink everything we thought we knew about her. Those restraints weren't meant to hold someone defending their child. That kind of strength, it's biological, triggered by instinct." Ron crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. "Great. So what do we do now? Let her roam free while we wait for round two?" "No," Lisa said firmly. "We keep her contained, but differently. We adjust the parameters, make it clear that we're not here to harm her or the cub." Stepped forward, her curiosity overriding her caution. "Do you think she understands us? I mean, does she have any concept of language?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But we need to try communicating with her. Start simple. Gestures, tones, maybe even visual aids. She's intelligent, that much is obvious." As they discussed their next steps, remained motionless, her attention focused solely on the cub. She stroked its smooth scales gently, humming softly under her breath. It was a low, vibrating sound, almost imperceptible, but it seemed to soothe the cub instantly. Its wide eyes closed and its tiny body relaxed against her. Chris watched the scene unfold, his earlier fear giving way to awe. "She's amazing," he murmured. Lisa nodded, her thoughts swirling. "Yes, she is, and she's also dangerous if provoked. But I don't think she's a threat unless she feels cornered or threatened." Ron grunted in agreement but didn't say anything. Instead, he turned his attention to the shattered remains of the containment cell. Cleanup crews would be needed soon, along with engineers to repair the damage. Security protocols would have to be rewritten, too. This incident had proven that traditional methods wouldn't work with someone like. Over the next hour, the crew worked to stabilize the situation. Temporary barriers were erected around to give her, and them, a sense of distance. Food and water containers were placed nearby, though no one was sure if she would accept them. To everyone's surprise, she ignored the offerings completely, her focus never wavering from the cub. Later that evening, after most of the crew had dispersed, Lisa stayed behind, watching from a safe distance. The alien sat cross-legged on the floor, the cub nestled comfortably in her lap. She continued to hum softly, rocking it gently as if lulling it to sleep. Lisa couldn't help but feel a pang of admiration and guilt. They had treated like a prisoner, locking her away without understanding who or what she truly was. Now, seeing her with the cub, Lisa realized how wrong they had been. "You're not alone anymore," Lisa whispered quietly, knowing full well that couldn't understand her. "We'll figure this out, together." Though didn't respond, Lisa swore she saw a flicker of acknowledgement in those obsidian eyes, a brief glimmer of trust forming amidst the chaos. And for the first time since bringing aboard, Lisa felt hopeful. The next morning, the observation deck was quiet except for the hum of monitors and the occasional beep of equipment. Lisa Morin sat at her workstation, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee as she reviewed the data collected during the night. Hadn't moved much since the previous evening. She remained seated on the floor, the cub curled up in her lap, occasionally stirring but mostly asleep. Every now and then would hum softly, a sound so low it was almost imperceptible unless you were close enough to hear it. Lisa sighed, rubbing her temples. Sleep had been elusive last night. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day before, the shattered restraints, the fractured the way had moved with such terrifying grace. But more than anything, she couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes when she held the cub. It wasn't anger or hostility, it was love. Pure, unrelenting maternal instinct. Joined her a few minutes later, carrying a tablet filled with notes. "I've been analyzing the recordings from yesterday," said, pulling up a chair beside Lisa. "There's something different about her biology, something we missed." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked, setting her coffee aside. "Well, remember how strong she got when the cub squeaked? That kind of power isn't normal, not even for someone like her. I think her body has some kind of adaptive mechanism. Maybe hormonal triggers that kick in when her offspring is in danger." Lisa nodded slowly. "That makes sense. A lot of Earth species have similar responses. Adrenaline spikes, muscles tense, reflexes sharpen, but this is on a whole other level." "Exactly," agreed. "Her cells are reacting to stressors in ways we can't fully explain yet. It's like her entire physiology shifts into overdrive, and once the threat passes, she goes back to baseline." Lisa leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen where vitals were displayed. "So she's not inherently dangerous, she's just protective." "Very protective," added with a small smile, "and maybe smarter than we realized. Did you notice how she responded to Chris? She didn't attack him. She waited until he offered the cub willingly." "That's true," Lisa said thoughtfully. "She could hurt him if she wanted to. Instead, she trusted him, or at least she gave him a chance." Ron Davis walked in a moment later, his usual scowl firmly in place. He glanced at the two women, then at through the temporary barrier. "What's the plan today?" he asked gruffly. "We're going to try communicating with her," Lisa replied. "Simple gestures, maybe some visual aids. We need to see if she understands us or if there's any way we can build trust." Ron raised an eyebrow. "You really think that's going to work?" "It's worth a shot," Lisa said firmly. "If she's intelligent and everything points to that being true, then she'll respond somehow." Stood up, grabbing a whiteboard and a marker. "Let's start basic. Food, water, shelter, universal concepts." Lisa nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was uncharted territory, and failure wasn't an option. If they couldn't find a way to connect with, tensions would only escalate further. Later that afternoon, the team gathered near a new containment area. The temporary barriers had been replaced with sturdier walls made of reinforced polymer, designed to give both parties a sense of security without completely isolating. Inside, she sat cross-legged, the cub nestled against her chest. She watched them warily, her obsidian eyes darting between each member of the group. Lisa stepped forward first, holding up a clear container filled with water. She pointed to it, then mimed drinking by bringing her hand to her mouth, tilted her head slightly, observing the gesture closely. When nothing happened, Lisa set the container down just outside the barrier. Then she stepped back, giving space to decide. For several long moments didn't move. Her gaze flicked between the container and Lisa as if weighing her options. Finally, she reached out cautiously, her three-fingered hand grasping the edge of the container. She pulled it toward her, sniffed it briefly, and then tipped it slightly, letting a few drops fall onto her tongue. "She likes it," whispered excitedly. Encouraged by the success, Lisa tried again. This time, she held up a piece of fruit, pointing to it and making a chewing motion. Again, hesitated before reaching for the offering. She examined it carefully, turning it over in her hands before taking a small bite. Chris watched from the sidelines, his earlier fear replaced by fascination. "She's learning," he murmured. "Fast." Lisa smiled faintly. "Yes, she is, but we need to go deeper. Let's see if she understands symbols." Knelt down, placing the whiteboard on the ground. Using the marker, she drew a simple picture of the sun, followed by a stick figure standing beneath it. She tapped the drawing, then pointed upward toward the ceiling, mimicking sunlight streaming down. Studied the image intently, her head tilting again. After a moment, she let out a soft hum and gestured toward the light fixtures above. "She gets it," Lisa said, her voice tinged with awe. Over the next hour, they continued testing's comprehension. They drew pictures of objects around the room, a chair, a table, the cub itself, and responded correctly every time. When they showed her a sketch of the escape pod where she'd been found, her expression darkened and she let out a low growl. "She remembers," said quietly. "Whatever happened to her, it's still fresh in her mind." Lisa nodded, her heart sinking. They needed answers, but pushing too hard might undo the fragile trust they were building. Finally, Lisa decided to take a risk. She picked up the marker and drew two figures, one larger, representing, and one smaller, representing the cub. Beneath them, she sketched a broken line radiating outward, symbolizing separation. Then she added another figure, a human shape, off to the side. Stared at the drawing for a long time, her breathing growing heavier. Slowly, she extended a finger and traced the line connecting the larger and smaller figures. Then she looked directly at Lisa, her obsidian eyes filled with raw emotion. "She wants her family back," Lisa said softly, "all of it." Frowned. "Do you think the cub is all that's left?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But we need to find out. If her people are gone, if she's alone, then we owe it to her to help." Ron cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Help how? We're scientists, not miracle workers." "We start by listening," Lisa said firmly, "and by showing her that we're not her enemies." As the day wore on, the team worked tirelessly to establish a rapport with. They brought her more food, showed her images of Earth's landscapes, and even played recordings of natural sounds like rain and wind. Each interaction brought them closer to understanding her, and with each passing hour, the tension in the room lessened. By the time evening fell, seemed calmer, more at ease. The cub lay sleeping in her arms, its tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Lisa watched them from afar, feeling a strange sense of kinship despite the vast differences between them. "She's remarkable," Chris said, joining Lisa near the observation window. "Yes, she is," Lisa agreed, "and she deserves better than what we've given her so far." Chris nodded solemnly. "Do you think Captain Foster will agree to let her stay here indefinitely?" "I hope so," Lisa replied, "because sending her away now, it wouldn't just be cruel, it would be wrong." As the lights dimmed and the crew began to disperse, hummed softly once more, cradling the cub protectively. For the first time since her arrival, she seemed content, not happy exactly, but at peace. And for Lisa, that was enough for now. The next morning, Captain Foster called an emergency meeting in the briefing room. The tension in the air was palpable as the senior staff gathered around the table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to unease. Lisa Morin sat at one end, her hands clasped tightly together, while Ron Davis leaned against the wall, arms crossed and jaw tight. Shuffled through a stack of notes on her tablet, her dark curls bouncing slightly as she moved. Chris stood quietly near the door, his eyes fixed on the floor. Captain Foster entered moments later, her presence commanding immediate attention. She placed a data crystal on the table and looked at each person in turn. "We've made significant progress with subject," she began, her tone measured but firm. "But we need to decide what comes next." Lisa leaned forward, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "Captain isn't just some specimen. She's intelligent, capable of communication, and deeply protective of her cub. We can't treat her like a prisoner anymore." Foster raised an eyebrow. "And what do you propose we do instead?" "We give her more freedom," Lisa said firmly. "Not complete autonomy, but enough to show her that we're not her enemies. Let her interact with us under controlled conditions. Use gestures, images, and sounds to build trust further." Ron interrupted, his voice gruff. "With all due respect, Captain, that's a risk we can't afford, if she breaks loose again." "She won't," Lisa interjected. "Not if we handle this carefully. Her actions so far have been defensive, not aggressive. She only attacked when she thought the cub was in danger." Nodded in agreement. "She's reacting based on instinct, not malice. If we keep treating her like a threat, she'll see us as one too." Foster tapped her fingers lightly on the table, considering their words. "You're asking me to gamble the safety of this ship and its crew on the assumption that she'll cooperate." "It's not an assumption," Lisa insisted. "It's based on observation. She's shown us she understands symbols, responds to kindness, and prioritizes the cub's well-being above everything else." Chris spoke up for the first time, his voice soft but earnest. "Captain, I've spent time near her. She's different from anything we've ever encountered, but she's not dangerous unless provoked. I think we owe it to her and to ourselves to try understanding her better." Foster studied him for a moment before turning back to Lisa. "If I agree to this, what's your plan?" Lisa took a deep breath. "We start by expanding her living space. Remove the barriers and replace them with sensors that alert us if she moves beyond designated areas. We bring objects from Earth, plants, fabrics, tools, to create a more natural environment. And we continue using visual aids and gestures to communicate." "And if something goes wrong?" Foster asked pointedly. "Then we fall back on the containment protocols," Lisa replied. "But I believe she'll respond positively if we show her respect." After a long pause, Foster nodded. "All right, you have 24 hours to prepare. After that, we proceed with your plan, but any sign of aggression and we lock her down immediately. Understood?" "Yes, Captain," Lisa said, relief washing over her. Later that day, the team worked tirelessly to transform containment area into something resembling a habitat. They removed the harsh polymer walls and replaced them with transparent energy fields that allowed light to filter through. Plants were brought in, lush ferns, small trees, and flowering shrubs, to mimic the landscapes they'd shown her on the tablet. Soft fabrics were draped over the floor, creating cozy spaces for her and the cub to rest. When everything was ready, Lisa approached the barrier holding a simple wooden box filled with items: a smooth stone, a woven blanket, a small figurine of an animal. She knelt down and set the box just outside the energy field, then stepped back to give space. Watched her cautiously, the cub nestled securely in her lap. For several moments she didn't move, her obsidian eyes scanning the room and taking in the changes. Finally, she reached out tentatively, pulling the box toward her. She opened it slowly, examining each object with care. When she picked up the woven blanket, she ran her fingers over its surface, testing its texture. Then she wrapped it gently around the cub, humming softly as it snuggled closer. Lisa smiled faintly, feeling a surge of hope. "She likes it," she whispered to who stood nearby. Over the next few hours, explored her new surroundings, touching the leaves of the plants, tracing patterns on the fabric-covered floor, and occasionally glancing at the humans observing her. Her movements were calm and deliberate, showing no signs of fear or hostility. Encouraged by her behavior, Lisa decided to introduce another element: music. She activated a small speaker and played a recording of instrumental melodies, soft piano notes accompanied by strings. Paused mid-step, tilting her head as the sound filled the room. After a moment, She hummed along, her low tones harmonizing with the music in an unexpected way. His eyes widened. She's responding rhythmically. That's incredible. It's beautiful, Lisa agreed, her heart swelling with admiration. As the day wore on, the team continued engaging with new stimuli. They showed her videos of animals, displayed maps of star systems, and even attempted to teach her basic gestures like waving and pointing. Each interaction deepened their connection, proving that was far more intelligent than they had initially realized. By evening, the atmosphere in the observation deck was markedly lighter. The crew laughed quietly as mimicked hand motions, her attempts clumsy but endearing. Even Ron seemed less tense, though he kept a wary eye on the energy fields surrounding her. Lisa sat down near the barrier, watching cradle the sleeping cub in her arms. "Do you think she knows we're trying to help?" Chris asked, joining her. "I think so," Lisa replied. "She's smart enough to understand our intentions, and she's starting to trust us, or at least, she's willing to give us a chance." Chris nodded thoughtfully. "What happens after this? Do we send her home or keep her here?" Lisa hesitated, her gaze drifting to the stars visible through the observation window. "I don't know, but whatever we decide, it has to be done carefully. She's not just an alien, she's a mother, a survivor, and she deserves to live without fear." As the lights dimmed and the crew dispersed for the night, hummed softly once more, her shimmering skin catching the faint glow of the overhead lamps. For the first time since arriving aboard the Aurora Dawn, she seemed truly at peace, a fragile harmony forged between two vastly different worlds. 2 weeks passed, and life aboard the Aurora Dawn settled into a fragile routine. Its habitat had become a sanctuary of sorts, a blend of Earth-like elements and carefully controlled technology designed to make her feel safe. The energy fields surrounding her space hummed softly, invisible yet reassuring to the crew who monitored her movements. Plants grew taller, their leaves brushing against the soft fabrics draped across the floor. The cub, now more active, scampered around its mother's feet, occasionally batting at the woven blanket or chewing on the smooth stone Lisa had provided. Lisa Morin spent most of her days in the observation deck, watching interact with her surroundings. Each day brought new discoveries about her behavior, her intelligence, and her emotions. Communicated through gestures, hums, and subtle shifts in posture, revealing a depth of understanding that astonished even. She wasn't just reacting to stimuli. She was learning, adapting, and forming connections. One evening, as the ship drifted silently through the void of space, Lisa sat at her workstation reviewing audio logs recovered from s escape pod. The recordings were fragmented, filled with static and distortion, but snippets of information emerged, clues to the tragedy that had brought here. "Listen to this," Lisa said, playing a section of the log for. A voice, deep and resonant, spoke in a language neither of them could understand. But beneath the alien words there was urgency, fear. Then came the sound of explosions, followed by silence. "She was fleeing something," murmured, "something catastrophic." Lisa nodded grimly. "Her people, they're gone. That much is clear. Whatever happened to them wiped out an entire civilization." Frowned. "Do you think she knows what caused it?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But we need to find out. If it's still out there, if whatever destroyed her world is still active, we have to warn others." The next morning, Lisa approached Captain Foster with the findings. The captain listened intently, her expression growing darker with each detail. "If her people were wiped out," Foster said slowly, "then we can't send her back. Not until we know what or who is responsible." "That's why I think we should help her," Lisa replied. "She's not just a survivor, she's a parent trying to protect her child. We owe it to her to give her a chance." Foster sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A way home," Lisa said firmly. "Not her original home, but somewhere safe, somewhere she can start over." Foster studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, make it happen." Over the following days, the engineering team worked tirelessly to repair and repurpose one of the smaller scout vessels docked in the hangar bay. It wasn't much, a single pilot craft designed for short-range reconnaissance, but it would be enough to carry and the Cub far from the dangers of their current situation. Meanwhile, Lisa focused on preparing for departure. Using images and gestures, she explained the concept of travel, showing her maps of star systems and pointing to the scout vessel. At first, seemed hesitant, her obsidian eyes clouded with uncertainty. But when Lisa mimed safety and protection, its expression softened slightly. On the final day, the crew gathered in the hangar bay to see off. The scout vessel gleamed under the harsh lights, its engines humming softly as engineers completed the last-minute checks. Stood nearby, the Cub cradled securely in her arms. She watched the humans move around her, her gaze lingering on Lisa and Chris. Lisa stepped forward, holding out a small data crystal. "This has star charts and warnings about the quadrant you're leaving," she explained, though she knew couldn't understand her words. "It's everything we know. Use it to stay safe." Tilted her head, studying the crystal before taking it gently in her hand. She pressed it to her chest, just above the Cub, and let out a low hum. Chris approached next, kneeling down to offer the Cub one last nuzzle. "Take care of him," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. For a moment no one moved. The air was heavy with unspoken farewells. Finally, turned toward the scout vessel, stepping inside with deliberate grace. She settled into the pilot's seat, the Cub nestled safely in her lap. As the ramp lifted and sealed shut, Lisa felt a pang of sadness and pride. They had misjudged, treated her like a threat instead of a sentient being, but in the end they had done the right thing. The engines roared to life, and the scout vessel lifted off the deck, hovering briefly before shooting forward into the vast expanse of space. Through the observation window, the crew watched until the tiny craft disappeared into the blackness. Lisa stayed behind, staring at the stars. In her log she wrote, "We thought we were containing a threat. Instead, we witnessed what it means to be human, just not from a human." And as the ship continued its journey, the memory of lingered, a reminder of the courage, love, and resilience that transcended species and worlds alike. And for Lisa, that was enough for now.